What's up, E-Units? This is Kobalt Steel with a new video for you. Today, I bring you a new series of videos called Kobalt Digital, in which I will review video games and electronics. The format of this series will be the same as the Kobalt Versus episodes, except with a greater emphasis on the reviewing aspect, because there's really not much you can do with an overview if you're just playing a game. I will also be providing footage of myself playing the games, although you will sometimes have to excuse the guerrilla style video recording. As of now, I lack a capture card. But anyway, for our first episode of Kobalt Digital, in celebration of the release of Sonic Mania and its grand awesomeness, I will unfortunately not be playing it because I don't have the consoles for it or a copy of the game. But when I do get it, I will certainly review it and play it for you. Instead of that, we will be taking a look at an old school Sonic game, particularly a Game Gear Sonic game titled Sonic Blast. I want to say that you should not worry, I will certainly talk about Sonic Mania and Sonic Forces in the near future. Don't worry. But anyway, is Sonic Blast a hidden gem from the blue blur or a game that was best left forgotten? Let's find out. Let the blue hedgehog animals commence. Before we go in, we should have a little history segment on our production. Unfortunately, information on this game is somewhat scarce. From what I can gather, Sonic Blast was developed by Aspect, who also developed Sonic 2 8-Bit and Tails Adventure, and was published by SEGA in 1996. Developed for the Game Gear, the title was the last first-party game on the Game Gear, and I believe the last one in Japan at all. The game was also released on the Sega Master System in Brazilian markets and later for the 3DS Virtual Console, which I have right here. The game was released in conjunction to the similarly named Sonic 3D Blast on the Sega Genesis, although aside from a similar graphical style and name, the games share no commonalities. On to the review, let's start with the story. The title screen shows us a giant emerald exploding into 5 smaller emeralds. And that's all we get, but I'll try to conjure up a story via inferences. Robotnik has built the Death Egg again, and plans to take over the world by obtaining the Chaos Emeralds. Sonic refuses to let this happen and intends to beat Robotnik to the punch to these emeralds and take down his giant Death Egg, whatever it is. Knuckles, not falling for Robotnik's nonsense again, teams up with Sonic to take down the evil egg-shaped man, and that's the story of Sonic Blast. The story is incredibly simplistic, but an acceptable motive to get players invested, although I found the inclusion of the Death Egg or whatever that is to be relatively awkward and shoehorned in, but I guess it's not hurting the game. But enough of that, let's talk about the gameplay. At the start of the game, players are able to select between Sonic and Knuckles. Both controlled similarly, although Sonic can double jump while Knuckles can glide. The game features 5 zones with 3 acts each. The goal, like with previous games, is to get to the end of the stage for the first 2 acts and beat the boss in the final act, which is against Robotnik in one of his machines. Surprisingly, the game plays very similar to the Genesis Sonic games, with Sonic and Knuckles featuring very similar movesets to Sonic Knuckles video game, and retaining the one-button control scheme to said Genesis games, where one button can be used to double jump, glide, or regular jump. However, unlike the Genesis games, Sonic Blast is much slower, and while this isn't a problem on its own right, it's combined with super basic level design and screen crunching. The first 2 zones, Green Hill and Yellow Desert, capture what I mean by the level design. The first acts provide only one real path to the end of the stage, unlike other games that feature multiple paths, but even then, the path that does exist barely feature any obstacles or enemies. You could almost just run without worrying about threats. And yes, although previous Sonic games' first zones feature easy level design to have players get used to the game more often, those first zones still offer multiple paths and many obstacles and enemies to fight. It encouraged exploration and experimentation as well as provides some level of challenge. The second acts are better as they are a bit more complex in level design and offer a level of challenge and exploration. However, the second act is where the second problem hits, the screen crunching. This is primarily a problem with the aesthetics, but you can barely see what's going on due to the sprites being so big and the viewing field being so small. Because of this, you really do not have a lot of time to react to whatever is happening in front of you. This can really cost you points and even your life. The screen crunching gets really bad in the last 3 zones, Red Volcano, Blue Marine, and Silver Castle, where the acts start to take on a more maze-like level design, the same level design you see in the second act, and they're worse here because those zones feature enemies and damaging obstacles that tend to be below you. And worse, those zones feature their own problems. Red Volcano and Silver Castle, the 3rd and 5th zones respectively, seem to be very cramped and tends to be hard to jump in those areas without hitting the ceiling or some obstacle / enemy. Blue Marine, the 4th zone, is just a more sufferable version of Labyrinth Zone. Imagine Labyrinth Zone, except much slower with a more maze-like design. Like with other Sonic games, players will have to go to special stages in order to obtain the Chaos Emeralds. This time they have to find rings in the first 2 acts of each zone. The special stages are similar to Sonic 2 with the Sonic 3 aesthetic, in which it's an auto-run stage where players must collect a certain number of rings to receive the prize. The first act stages are 1-ups, while the second act ones are Chaos Emeralds. However, these stages are not really hard. You go relatively slow, and the stage provides 20 more rings than you need on average, and they're hypothetically easy to get, really. The problem is that depth perception is practically non-existent. Objects lack drop shadows to tell players where they or where the objects are exactly, and you're likely to miss a ring or hit a boost pad or bumper by accident because of this. Along with that, some rings are positioned in a very awkward way, and the most common way is a giant arc. You think that you jump with a boost pad to get all the rings, but you'll end up missing them because the arcs are just too big for you. It should also be noted that, like other games, getting all Chaos Emeralds will grant players a special ending, but this one, it's not really anything special. It's just a death egg crashing and that's it. The boss battles for these zones are not particularly challenging either, even the final boss in a sense. They do provide various attacks and they do take a while in some zones like this one, but all you have to do is hit the cockpit of the ship multiple times and Robotnik's gone. There is a slight exception with Silver Castle where you have to deflect lasers at Robotnik by moving around on this giant wheel. It's the only good-ish boss in this game, although it's very long and repetitive. But about challenge, that's probably the biggest problem in this game. The game fails to provide genuine challenge for the player, and the stuff that is provided is more of an annoyance or the fault of the game itself than actual challenge. I mean, the level design is basic and the special stages and bosses aren't really difficult. Instead, the game's challenge comes from its screen crunch, slowdowns, and bosses being long and repetitive and requiring many hits. Challenge should require thinking of strategies to overcome obstacles or something similar, not blind leaps of faith or repeating almost the exact same thing over and over again. And if I haven't said this already or stressed it enough, the only thing you can really do in this game is go to the goal and maybe get a special stages if you want. That's it. There aren't any alternative paths or anything, it's just follow that one path to the goal and get the special stage. Overall, despite replicating the Genesis style gameplay closely, the game provides very little in terms of exploration, experimentation, and challenges. Let's do quality of productions now. A notable aspect about Sonic Blast is the use of pre-rendered graphics, which I bet was used to capitalize on Donkey Kong Country using similar graphics and being really popular and highly rated for it. The pre-rendered graphics do look nice, although they are noticeably rougher due to being on an 8-bit console, and there are some awkward sprite errors such as the white parts of Sonic's shoes expanding in some sprites for some reason. However, a big problem with Sonic Blast is that, as we established before, the character sprites take up a lot of the game screen, making it difficult to see where you're going and increasing the risk of being damaged or dying. This can get somewhat annoying, as you'll often take leaps of faith as well as slow down to make sure you don't die or hit something. In fact, I would not be surprised that the game suffered heavily because of these graphics taking up so much of the screen and memory. I bet it made level designing a little difficult because the sprites are so big. I'm not sure if it's going to show up, but I did notice that the backgrounds tend to glitch up in certain areas, but in my many playthroughs of this game, I only encountered it in Green Hill Zone. You might not also see it, but Yellow Desert Act 1 sky gets slightly bluer when you go down this hole. In terms of music, the tunes are generic and basic tunes. They aren't terrible, but the only memorable tunes from this game would be the Silver Castle and Final Boss music. At least to me, they are. It's odd really, Sonic tunes tend to be very memorable, whether it's for a good or bad reason. But anyway, despite this, the aesthetics are pretty decent, but I think they costed the game a lot. Sonic Blast is a perfect example of why game content and gameplay should be prioritized over aesthetics. Even though the visuals were pretty good, the game lacked genuine challenge, good level design, and additional content that made other 8-bit Sonic games like Sonic 1 8-bit and Triple Trouble memorable and enjoyable. Sonic Blast is unlikely to be fun for many people because of its lack of challenge, lack of content, and super basic level design. It's very likely why those who remember this game do not think of it fondly. This is not to say that aesthetics are unimportant, but much like you do not prioritize visuals over story and characters in movies, don't prioritize aesthetics over gameplay or gameplay content. This game costs between $4.50 to $5 on the game's virtual console, and it's not really that worth it. Just get a different game, really. Just skip this game. Well, that is all for today, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like, comment, and subscribe for more Kobalt Steel. Until next time, see you all later.